Hey there, it's Olivia Spanner here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a recent reads of 10 books that I've read and my thoughts on them. Please do strap in because I have a lot of rants to do here, and I'm going to leave content warnings in the description box down below in case that's something you might need. But without further ado, let's get down to talking about some of these books in a lot of detail. So we're going to start on a negative Nancy and then we're going to move forwards through the book. So there's one book that's really popular and I wanted to give it a go, and I gave it a go and I absolutely hated it, and that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Now this is a literary fiction book about these two people, this woman and this man who design a game together, and it's about what happens when they design this game together, their relationship over time and all of that stuff. I went into this one because I'm personally very interested in learning about industries that other people are in that are not my own. So I was very interested in seeing more about video gaming, building video games, and when this was marketed, it was really marketed and pandered towards the gamers in the world. And I'm not really a gamer anymore. I struggle to call myself that because I don't play games the way that I used to, but I can sometimes still get addicted to a game quite easily. This was not enough about gaming for me. The beginning is very much about building a game. It doesn't go into too much detail on what that pertains and what that includes, but it still is a bit more gaming focused. After they make the first game, it then just is not about gaming. It's not really about building a game. It's not really about that dynamic. It then turns into your typical literary fiction book with, you know, different perspectives included in it. I personally did not like any of these characters. All of them, every single one of them is unlikable, and that was a struggle for me. I particularly struggled with the manic pixie dream girl that Sadie, our main character who is female, is. She's surrounded by a lot of men in her life, which is as to be expected in the video gaming community, but it seems like every single main character man that's introduced in this book falls in love with Sadie, or wants to be with Sadie, or wants to sleep with Sadie. Like, every single man wants to be with her. I hate that kind of representation for women in books like this. It really feels heavily male gazy, and there was something about this writing style that felt so heavily male gazy, and I do think the fact that Sadie was desirable to absolutely every man that she interacted with in this book had something to do with it. I also really struggled with the depiction of Sam as a disabled main character. I don't think people talk about the fact that he's a disabled main character enough. I don't know what it is about literary fiction when there's a disabled character that kind of gets looked over as representation, but it boiled my blood to see this kind of disabled representation that I absolutely loathe and that I see time and time again. I don't know if it's just me and how connected I am to the disabled community through my sibling, but I've never ever met a single disabled person who has been disabled for as long as Sam has, who tries to pretend their disability doesn't exist. There's just something about having a disability, it seems, where you cannot pretend it doesn't exist. I just don't see people ignoring all their aids, ignoring all the medical care that they can have to live in pain and seem to want to crave that pain and ignore any help possible. I do think there are stages of having a disability, especially when you're not born with a disability, where you can feel that way, but it's not throughout your whole life. That's just the viewpoint that I've seen from talking to people in the disabled community, listening to what the disabled community have to say, reading about the disabled community by disabled authors. And so when I get representation like this, it just kind of makes me so frustrated because I'm like, whose experience is this? But who am I as an able-bodied person to say all of these things? I went and I researched and I looked into reviews, and guess what the disabled community are saying? The same things, so maybe we should listen to them. Sam's disability representation irked me. I was not a big fan of the representation of race in here. Sam and Mark are our people of colour characters, and there were just moments where I was just like, this rubs me up the wrong way. Even if we strip all of that away, I will just say it. This book is boring. I feel like it was incredibly slow paced. I don't feel like there was enough payoff. I feel like you can clearly see where it's going, and then when it gets to the end, it wasn't satisfying. I wasn't satisfied with how this book finished. So from the storytelling perspective, I didn't root for any of the characters. I wasn't that invested in the plot. I was promised a lot of gaming, and then the gaming was all in the very, very beginning. I actually almost DNF'd this book many times, but I was discussing it with friends and family who have read it and who are keen to see my thoughts. Little did they know I was going to have I hate everything about this thoughts, but that's kind of where I lie. So Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is very, very popular, but it is absolutely not the book for me. Then I read a sequel. I read More Days at the Morizaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa, and translated by Eric Ozawa. Now this is the sequel to Days of the Morizaki Bookshop, which is about somebody who is feeling very unhappy with their life, and then they end up working at their uncle's bookshop and they start to find a love of reading and books, and that kind of heals them in some ways and contributes to them feeling happier in life. I read the first book a little while ago and I thought this was fine. It was okay. I liked part 1 more than part 2, but I already had this sequel and they're not very long, so I thought why not read it and maybe I'll have some more of those cozy feelings. And to be honest, this one felt quite flat to me. I thought it was fine. Like, I don't have a big dislike of this book. I don't have a big love of this book. I just read it and I had a decent enough time. I do think it kind of went in a direction that didn't really attribute to much coziness, and some of it was about a romance but it didn't feel very romantic. Some of it was about like missed chances of romance and friendship, but it didn't quite hit the nail on the head for me. So most of the time that I was reading this book I was like, I'm not really getting anything from it. I don't think I like any of these characters anymore. What is this plot doing? I couldn't see where it was going. And then it came together at the end and it centered a bit around the theme of grief for the very last part of the book, and I've been grieving quite recently. I would still say that I'm grieving now, and some of the way that it talked about grief, I was like, okay, that hits home, that's very accurate. And so I think the best thing that this book does is have a moment where it focuses on grief, but that's not for the majority of this story, and so I don't know what to really make of this. I just read it and it was fine. That's it really. We're back in Rants Central. I did tell you to strap in. So we're going to get this one out of the way here. I gave this book 1 star. I absolutely hated it. And it's very, very rare that I give a book 1 star. I think the last 1 star I gave was over 3 years ago. There's a whole rant review for that. The book that I gave 1 star to, The Murder in the Rue Morgue and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe. Is a very simple, straightforward reason why I gave this book a 1 star. It's racist. Edgar Allan Poe was a raging racist, which I knew before I started it, but I didn't know how much it was going to manifest in these books, and I'd only been warned after I'd already acquired this book in and of itself. So lots of these stories are very, very racist. That's the most predominant thing, but the last final story, you know, when I kind of dragged myself through all of these stories, I thought maybe the last one's going to be decent. The last one was the most racist, the most ableist, the most xenophobic story of them all, and I was kind of shocked that it was still included in this collection. Edgar Allan Poe is known for writing gothic short stories and being canon with the genre of gothic, and I can see why in terms of what these stories are doing is definitely the gothic genre, but personally as a reader I didn't find many of them that scary. There were some of his very famous stories in here, The Murder in the Rue Morgue being one of them, but also, what was the other one that's really famous? The Mask of the Red Death is also in here, in The Fall of the House of Usher, and I was disappointed in all of those stories, especially The Murders in the Rue Morgue. Like, what is that murder? What is that resolution? And also he does something that's so annoying with his writing, where if it's about a character, he loves to describe them to a T, and I don't care what they look like. I don't need 2 to 3 pages describing the character. He also seems to hate dialogue. I don't know why he hates dialogue, but loads and loads of these stories are just blocks and blocks of words on the page describing things, describing conversations without them happening in real time. He just loves to describe. That's all these short stories are. In terms of removing the racism, removing the problematic elements, the stories themselves are not written well, and that is a struggle for me. He also loves to have a mystery, kind of like The Murder in the Rue Morgue, but also another one where they solve the mystery and then they go back and like they rewind and tell you how they solved that mystery. And I'd much rather we went through them solving the mystery and then we were told like how they did it. So personal opinion of how I like my mysteries told to me is the reverse order of the way that Edgar Allan Poe was doing them. I just found these really boring. I was checking out for most of them. Anything nautical that's horror doesn't particularly scare me that much. So all of the ones where they were on a ship and a storm was happening, whatever, it just didn't scare me. And so I didn't find these scary. I didn't really like any of the characters. I was mostly offended. Can we just please remove this from the gothic canon? Okay, after that rant, we're going to talk about a book that I liked. And so I'm holding up Waiting for the Flood by Alexis Hall, and you'll be like, Olivia Savannah, you've read that book several times. What are you talking about reviewing it? And the answer is, in this newly republished edition of Waiting for the Flood by Alexis Hall, now that it's been picked up by traditional publishers, halfway through, because this is a big book and Waiting for the Flood is a novella, halfway through you will slip into this. which is Chasing the Light by Alexis Hall, and that's a different story, a new story that it's not been seen before. Chasing the Light is the story of Marius. So if you read Waiting for the Flood, it's about a couple, and one of the couple, Edwin, has been broken up from a 10-year relationship that was very long spanning, and so in this next book you get Marius's story, and that is the person that's Edwin's ex basically. And Marius is a man of many troubles. He is very self-sabotaging, he is very cruel, and he knows it. He's got a lot of self-awareness about this. And so I had some trepidations about reading his story because I was like, I'm not gonna like this character. And if you haven't gathered from my previous reviews, me and unlikable characters don't get along. However, once I got into the story, I was in it, strapped down, ready to keep reading. Alexis Hall could write a receipt and I would read it. Their writing is just so lyrical and lush and delicious and lovely. It slips down your throat like silk. Honestly, Alexis Hall's writing is something else, and I just love that we get this delicious, wonderful writing in romantic books like this one. So if you want to just read some really good writing style, you should read Alexis Hall's books. I really liked that we have like a Polish love interest, so Marius is Polish, and then you've got Leo. Leo is the sweetest human being to walk this earth. He deserves everything good that the world could offer him. He's just this sweet little boy living in a boat who just has so much hope, and both of these characters are working on healing, which I really like to see because Leo's further along in his healing journey than Marius is, and Marius is kind of in the thick of the beginning where you don't think you deserve healing, but you're trying to work your way towards it nonetheless. And so I just like seeing these two characters both healing in their own ways, both kind of finding their way to love. And it's a very short, it's a very sweet story. There's some steaminess in it, and it's not too steamy, it's kind of like medium steam level, but it's also really beautiful to read. And another thing that I particularly like about this one is that I love in adult fiction when you see adults go to their parents, because I think sometimes there's this image in adult fiction where you become an adult and then you never talk to your parents again. But I like that you get to see kind of Marius' parents getting involved, tangling up in a story, making messes of places, making messes of things everywhere. And so I just genuinely enjoyed this. I don't think it's the most filled out story in the Spires series, which is one of my favourite romance series ever, but it's one that I can see myself returning to and rereading like I reread all the rest of them, and it's just a really lovely addition that I didn't think I needed until I had it. I also read Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. It's about this little girl called Annie who lives on Antigua, and then she kind of gets her period and suddenly her mum says she's a woman now, and everything she knows about her life and knows about how she's been living has changed. And slowly as she grows up and becomes more of a woman according to her mother, her relationship and her thoughts and perspective on her mother changes. And this is kind of an exploration of when you are younger and you realize that your parents are not heroes, they're not perfect, they're just people making mistakes just like you, and you might not even always get along with them. And that's what this book is kind of discussing. I also think it's showing how Annie slowly and gradually starts to want more than life is offering her at the moment. She wants a different life, she wants something different, and I quite liked these themes that are woven into this book. However, I still found it to be just an okay read. Like, I read it in 2 sittings because Jamaica Kincaid's writing is just that wonderful and just that good, but I do think I wanted more from the story. I kind of wanted a bit more of a moment that was a significant shift in Annie John's development as a character, but her character development is slower, it's steadier, and it's kind of quiet revelations rather than a big moment. And I just was hungering after a bit more of a significant moment for me to think, this is what the story is hinging around, because otherwise it kind of just feels like a slice of life piece, which is fine, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for in my books anymore. And I really struggled when I did some more research into this, because I was thinking, oh, this story is queer. There is mentions of the girls kissing and there's mentions of other things that the girls do. But when I did my research into this, because I tend to look into my books a little bit, Jamaica Kincaid in all her interviews says this book is not sapphic and those girls are not queer and it's not to be taken so literal. And I'm just like, ma'am, the words you wrote on the page cannot be misconstrued. But yeah, it was a decent read. It's a very quick read and it was a good time for while I was on holiday, but I don't think this is the story I'm going to be returning to. Oh my gosh, I had such a bad stint of books. So I read the Honjin Murders by Seishi Yokomizo. This is a translated Japanese murder mystery, and it's a Japanese classic that's been translated. So this is the first one in the series, but I actually read the second one in the series first. You can read them as standalones, and I thought that one was okay. I enjoyed it, I just didn't love it. But I thought, let me go back and read the first one, especially as someone got this for me as a gift, someone that I know in real life. And I read this one, and I hated the ending. I really hated the ending. I hated the implications of the ending. And there's just something about a murder mystery where sometimes you don't know how much you dislike it until you get to the reveal and everything falls apart like putty in your hands, and you're like, actually I don't like this book. So I got myself through, it's not that long, this book, without realizing that I was going to hate it by the end, which means you just can't DNF it, and that's a thing. It's just a thing, and it happened, and it's fine. We revisit the same detective, but of course this is the like origin of how this detective became to be such a famous detective, which I know in the second book, but you don't know in the first one. And I don't mind this detective. He's fine. He does what he needs to do, but he takes a long time doing it for a detective. And there was a lot of rehashing of the information that we know that I didn't exactly need repeated to me, and I was just merrily reading it, unoffended, until we got to the end. Now I can't tell you why I dislike this book because that would be spoilers, and I don't want to do spoilers here, but I will be able to tell you two things. First of all, this book is very misogynistic, and the misogyny is tied to the mystery. That's all I can say without giving anything away, and so I just hated how misogynistic this was once it was revealed to me how deep and steep the misogyny goes. And then secondly, I just don't believe it. I find it's very unrealistic that this murder could have been pulled off. That's all I can say. I'm not a big fan of unrealistic murder mysteries. I'm not a big fan of misogynistic books. This has both. We're getting onto some books that I actually liked here. So I really enjoyed The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. This is not my first G.K. Chesterton book I've read before. I've read some of the Father Brown series, not all of them. And so when I was reading this, I was kind of going in expecting it to be similar to the Father Brown stories. Don't do that. They are nothing alike. This is a very different book, but it's a very good one nonetheless. So what we're following is this kind of police force who are trying to infiltrate a group of anarchists, and we follow one particular policeman who is infiltrating the anarchist group. And I have to tell you, that first chapter was fantastic. I was immediately loving this detective that we're following, because the way that he set up his infiltration and the way he pulled it off with so much sophistication, with such a cool guy vibe, and incredibly cleverly done. I was like, this is a detective that would be friends with Poirot, and Poirot would be impressed with him, and so I could really get behind the detective. Then this book has quite an like offhand sense of humor buried in a lot of what is happening here. And so I found myself cackling and laughing out loud, even though this book is not like laugh out loud funny when you read it, but there's so many things that are just like situational humor or just like a slight wordplay, and I was just like surprised by how funny I managed to find this book and how entertaining it was. And then when it comes to the actual story, it is so wild. As you can imagine, when you're infiltrating a group of anarchists, it's going to be quite an anarchy feeling plot, and the plot was full of anarchy. Like, it was anarchy and madness everywhere, and I was here for it because it made the plot so unpredictable, because it just meant I was strapped in and sitting there for every single twist and turn. The only thing is that I don't think I quite understood the last few pages, like the very end of the book. I'm not sure I quite understood it. Maybe it's just because I don't have the brain cells to do it, because this book is quite high concept, but I still had a good time and I still enjoyed this book from beginning to end. So I think this is one that I would really recommend, and as a classic it can surprise you because it's very readable, but it's just very entertaining as well. I then read Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl by Joya Goffney. This is the third and final Joya Goffney I needed to read before I read them all, and I know it's been hard this recent reads, but I'm proud to say that I gave this 5 stars and it became a new favourite. This is a young adult contemporary book about a young black teenager who really wants to sleep with her boyfriend for the first time. However, she finds it incredibly painful, she's really struggling, and her boyfriend and her have tried many times. They're also doing this on the down low because she is the daughter of a preacher man, and so everything has to be under wraps because her parents definitely would not approve of her being this young and sleeping with people yet. That's kind of the plot of this book, and it's about her realizing that it might not happen for her and her boyfriend getting tired of it, breaking up with her, and her trying to find a way to be able to sleep with him so that she can win him back. I really love this book for a multitude of reasons. So the representation in this one is vaginismus, which is a condition that I did not know that much about before I read this book, and this book was an eye-opening experience to me. I learned a lot about a condition that I knew nothing about. If you know nothing about vaginismus, this is a really great place to learn, but I also think it's a really fantastic resource for teenagers to learn about this condition. It manages to do it in a way where there's a good plot around it. It manages to do it in a way where it's playful and it's entertaining, but you're still getting so much key information fed to you that you don't actually realize that you are taking in all of this information. A lot of this book is also about characters' self-worth, and I really loved her journey as she discovered that she's so much more than whether or not she can, you know, do the things that she wants to do with a romantic partner. And she puts a lot of her self-worth on that in the beginning of the book, and that journey that she goes to of unlearning some of the conditions that she knows of what it means to be a Christian woman. I really enjoyed that, and that leads me on to the next thing that I absolutely loved, and that's the depiction of faith in this book. There's a lot in here, a lot about purity culture and about how toxic purity culture is, and this book is incredibly balanced. It manages to unpick and unlearn a lot of the toxic elements around purity culture, but at the same time it manages to depict faith in a way where, yes, you can see how sometimes the church and its institutions and particular leaders of church could be wrong and make mistakes because they are only human and they are people, but it also shows that faith can be a good thing, and it can be a joyous thing, and it can be an inclusive thing, and it can be a lovely thing. You get to see like queer Christian side characters and characters who are Christian but who don't follow this stereotype of what a Christian should look like, and it can show that faith can be a good thing, but it can also be wielded for bad things. And I think that's a hard tone to balance in a fiction book, where you want to show that there can be good sides to something, as sensitive as faith can be to some people, and also how there can be negative sides to something. And I like how with a range of characters that the author has included, you get to see all these different types of living and walking with faith, and what faith can do for people who don't have it, and what it can do for people who do, in good and bad ways. Now we can talk about the romance that's in this young adult contemporary book. It's one of the sweetest romances, and let me tell you, it's not a straight line journey. The course of true love never did run smooth. It is messy, it is overly complicated because they are teenagers who are overly complicating things that they probably didn't need to, but the love interest is just so sweet and just so lovely. I loved him, I loved getting to see him, there was something about this that wasn't just like, it's a romance, here's how they fall in love, but it's a romance, here's how them being together make each other better. And I think that element of a romance is something that sometimes I don't see enough in young adult contemporary books, but here you can really see how both of them grow and become better people by being together, and that, if that is not love, I don't know what is. So that was really just sweet and wholesome and adoring to see. You get to see parents who make mistakes and parents who admit that they are wrong at times, and I really liked seeing that the parents had to learn, that the parents had to grow, and that the parents had to change in this book. All of the characters are black pretty much, so I really liked that we get black representation. That was really authentic and really nice to see. What more could I tell you about how much I loved this book? It was written so well, and also Joya Goffney just does this thing marvellously, which she's done marvellously again in this book, where she's got a plot line that has to do with vaginismus, she's got a plot line that has to do with faith, she's got a plot line that has to do with family, a plot line to do with friends and friendship and forming new friendships, and a plot line to do with the parental figures. All of those plot lines are included in this book. All of them are given enough time, all of them are well balanced, all of them are well portrayed, and I just marvel at that author's skill to be able to give all of these themes, so many moments, the due time they deserve. This book all comes together at the end with a particular scene that has to do with kind of all of those threads that I've described at once, and I loved it. I loved how she chose to end it. I loved what that ending meant for everything that we've learned in this book, and so this book just became a new favourite. I absolutely adored it. I can't recommend it more to people who read YA contemporary books. After that, I was clearly in the mood to keep reading YA contemporary, so I read You've Got a Match by Emma Lord. This is my third time reading Emma Lord, and I'm happy to say I think I found an author I really like because I really enjoyed this one. You may think, oh, this is going to be a romance-focused YA contemporary. That is not the case at all. This is a family-focused YA contemporary because it's about this girl who is with her parents. She's kind of mourning the loss of her grandfather who's recently passed away. She's got 3 younger brothers, and to help a friend out, she does a DNA test with him, and when she does that DNA test, she finds out, wow, she has a match. She has a sister who is older than her that she knows nothing about, that her parents have never mentioned. And so she decides to try and reach out to this person and get to know them and see what has gone on in their past to make them sisters who don't know each other at all. And that is the storyline for this one. Now, I've got to be honest with you, sometimes the storyline in this is a little bit far-fetched. Sometimes you have to suspend your disbelief, especially because apparently there's some characters who have known both of these sisters who look very alike but have never put 2 and 2 together that they may be related to each other, which I really struggle to believe with how much resemblance the book says that they have. However, in other ways, I really didn't care because I was having such a good time. This is a YA that's kind of set at a summer camp. So if you were someone like me who read all of those teenage summer camp books where characters go to summer camp and have the best time and they prank each other and they have slumber parties and all sorts of other shenanigans go on, and maybe there's a side romance, it will bring you back to your youth and it'll bring you back to that feeling, but with a bit more maturity to it, with a bit more of a better writing style. I have to say Emma Lord's writing is very, very good. And so I liked this. I liked seeing how the focus was actually on family in this particular book, on family relationships, on complex family dynamics, in what can lead people to have to maybe, you know, make some really tough choices when it comes to family that you don't want to. I'm trying to skirt around spoilers here. And I liked how it talked about all of that. And again, in this one in particular, you get to see and hear from the parents about why the parents have made the choices that they have, whether they regret those choices or not, whether they've made mistakes, and how, as a parent, you can have those really tough and true conversations with your teenagers. So I really liked all of that in this book. There's also some of those fun pranks and that nostalgia feeling that I was really looking for. There's a romance in it that's quite messy in the way that teenagers can be messy, as I've said for the previous book. That does it very well here, and you kind of know how things are going to end before they do. Everything kind of ties up very, very neatly and works out very, very well, which again, I'm not quite sure it would in this scenario and situation, but I just had to say that I enjoyed this book because I had a good time. It gave me the summer feeling that I wanted it to. I read this when I was traveling, when I was working, and it was a really good breather and break from all of the many things I was carrying in my head at the time. So I enjoyed another Emma Lord book. And then last but not least, I read A House for Miss Pauline by Diane McAuley. This is what the finished cover looks like, and this is a book by a Jamaican author that is set in Jamaica, and I read it while I was in Jamaica. And this is one of those books where it really lingered with me. I finished it and I thought that was fine, and then 2 weeks later I was still thinking about this book in avid detail. This one is about Miss Pauline. She's an elderly lady who lives in the Jamaican countryside, and she believes the stones in her house are moving and trying to tell her something. That's where we start with this plot. I really thought this book was going to be more about this sentient house and what it was trying to tell her. That's not what this book is. It's actually a literary fiction book that delves into Miss Pauline's past and how she came to be the Miss Pauline that we see she is today, but also about the consequences of ancestral history and the choices that she makes as she discovers more and more about how her house came to be. I really like this. It's written in patois, so be prepared for all of the speech that Miss Pauline says to be in thick patois, and I like that. I just think there's something about the dialogue being in the real voice of those characters and how they would speak that just adds to the atmosphere, that just adds to the setting all the more. And that's one thing the book does really, really well. It's set in the Jamaican countryside, or like the bush equivalent, and it is so steeped in that setting. Every description makes me feel like I'm there. I also just really love following elderly main characters. We don't get to do that very often in books, and Miss Pauline was a sassy, no nonsense, swearing, old black woman, and I just loved those vibes. They felt so authentic, they felt so true. She was up and active and going places despite her old age, but even then it was realistic because her body was failing her in some ways. It was getting harder for her to go out as much as she really wanted to. Miss Pauline has a lovely connection to a young teenager, and I always just love that dynamic of an elderly person and a teenager. It just reminds me of a couple of years ago with my grandma, so I really liked getting to see that. But I do think this one has a bit of a pacing issue. The story is quite slow in places, then it speeds up in others. A lot of the time I was wondering, like, what is the point of this book? Where is it going? Where is it driving me? What are we steering to? That makes it an unpredictable book, but it also just makes me lack a bit of guidance that made me lose interest in some parts. So I would say that the characterization in this is incredibly strong, the authenticity in this is incredibly strong, the descriptions of it, beautiful, atmosphere, setting, strong, 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 but the weakest point of this is the plot and the pacing. Not to say that the plot is bad, it just wasn't as intriguing. So overall I had a good time reading this book, but I do think it's not a flawless one, but it is one that I sat with and I thought about for a very long time, and that doesn't always happen for me. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on 10 books that I've recently read. Please let me know in the comment section down below. Have you read any of these books? Do you have any thoughts on any of these books? And if not, please tell me what was the last book that you finished and what you thought of it. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!